Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Citizen Go for attending and also for your submission. President Trump, who's just been swept to power, promises to dismantle the censorship regime globally. The Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance, has in the last few days indicated that the United States would penalise nations for adopting the exact measures contained in this bill. What effect will this have on the operability of this bill? Is this bill likely to undermine AUKUS?
Yes, it is, and the outcome of what President-elect Trump has said effectively makes this bill null and void and dead in the water. So you are trying to enact legislation, I said the metaphorical you, are trying to enact legislation that, well, you're not, are trying to enact legislation that would be effectively dead in the water. If I ran one of the major social media giants, Facebook, Google or even X, I would just merely shut down my Australian operations, operate out of America where I have free speech amendment protections, and completely ignore whatever your legislation says. I know you're not going to shut me down, so I will just continue to operate.
Thank you. Do you think they really will shut down operations in Australia? Because the government says that they cannot trust social media platforms. I agree. The platforms are the problem. Isn't it that we need more transparency of these platforms and what they do and how they censor already indiscriminately and for their own purposes?
The platforms are a problem. I don't trust them either. That being said, I definitely don't trust the government when it comes to trying to protect people from misinformation. The greatest peddlers of misinformation historically has been government MPs and the administrative state. So, an example, weapons of mass destruction, the Russiagate hoax, Hunter Biden laptop story, safe and effective, Gladys Berejiklian effectively telling people if they sat down they won't catch COVID, but if they stand up they will. This legislation is the equivalent of saying, well, we have an issue with bushfires, so let's hand over power to arsonists. It is insane. It should not be enacted in any way, shape or form. So whilst social media companies have their issues, whilst I do not trust social media companies, what you're finding is there is already an open source solution to misinformation. X is a perfect example. Community Notes, I would say, is far more accurate than what ACMA would ever be able to achieve.
So what we're hearing from the government is we cannot trust social media platforms, yet the government now gives them added power, added incentive to actually censor people even more.
Well,
is that not correct?
They effectively make social media platforms another tier of government by working closely with them to shut down any online dissent or anything that could be deemed misinformation, using very spurious definitions of what would be considered misinformation or harmful content.
Thank you. As I understand the bill, the penalties for under-censoring are severe on social media platforms. The penalties for over-censoring are non-existent. Isn't that an automatic incentive to over-censor?
Yes.
Protect social media responsibilities?
Well, we've already seen cases where, albeit in other countries, social media companies have over-censored information, and that's in the absence of misinformation legislation. Hunter Biden laptop story is the perfect example. That was a completely true story. All of it was factually correct. The CEO of Facebook has admitted that he was approached by intelligence community assets and told to get rid of the information. They shut that down at a time during an election where it actually could have informed voters. And that's in a country where they have a free speech amendment and they don't have misinformation legislation. Imagine what would happen in this country if someone went out there and actually had information that could sway an election and it was truthful, but we have an unelected bureaucracy with deeply flawed people. We're all flawed, we're all biased, acting on legislation that has a very vague definition of what constitutes misinformation and what constitutes serious harm. Imagine what they would do in a country like Australia. They would crack down on all forms of information. It's an egregious bill.
So your proposal is perfectly clear. I'm going to quote. The bill represents an unprecedented threat to free speech in Australia.
Yes.
It goes on to say the right to free speech is a God-given liberty essential to human dignity and democracy. End of quote. Would you characterise this bill as a direct attack on Australia's democracy?
Absolutely.
And is one of the problems not the fact that there is no arbiter to truth, and yet in the real world the best way to expose the truth is to have free and open debate until the truth is revealed.
Yeah, when it comes to speech, the best disinfectant is sunlight, right? So if there's bad speech out there, if there's incorrect speech out there, the best thing is to have more speech to counter that. We see that, in its early stages with community notes on X, where you've got an open source system where people can fact check misleading claims. And as I said, often these misleading claims come from the people that are proposing to regulate misleading claims.
22,000 of your members clearly agree with you. Are your members planning to campaign personally against any member of this parliament that supported this bill?
Absolutely.
How many members do you expect to have on the ground by next May?
We have over 100,000 members in our database in Australia alone. I would expect thousands to be on the ground.
You invoked the late Liberal Party founder, Sir Robert Menzies' quote, "The whole essence of freedom is that it is freedom for others as well as for ourselves. Freedom for people who disagree with us as well as for our supporters. Freedom for minorities as well as for majorities." End of quote. Opposition leader Peter Dutton did not vote against the bill in the House of Reps. Do you believe, and I believe that the Liberal Party, and I believe that Peter Dutton wants his own disinformation bill. Do you believe Peter Dutton's reported support for this bill in some form is abandoning core Liberal Party value?
So I might just stop you there, Senator
Sure.
Roberts. The vote last week, I believe you'll find that that Mr Dutton did indeed vote against the bill. That's
Okay,
correct, is it
well,
not?
I stand corrected.
Coalition voted against the bill in the
Yes.
House.
Just so
corrected.
that you're putting an accurate question to the witness here.
Thank you.
I know
Thank you
it
very
only
much.
happened very, very recently. Yeah.
And it's illustrative of what we need. You've just corrected me, and I've accepted that correction.
We won't
However,
prosecute
it's
you,
also
though.
We
correct
didn't have to go to
that-
ACMA.
Such misinformation, Malcolm.
Exactly. It's also correct. It's also correct that the Morrison Little Proud government introduced the disinformation bill, and that Peter Dutton has said that he supports a Liberal bill and will go towards introducing that. Is the Liberal Party abandoning core Liberal Party values?
Look, the Liberal Party needs to just look at their We Believe statement and enact any legislation that abides by that. That's been my position for a long time. Sometimes the Liberal Party sleepwalks into stupid legislation to try and appease people who hate them, and it doesn't work. So my hope is that they do not enact speech controls, which is what these sorts of bills are, and my hope is that they oppose the misinformation bill in its entirety, in any form.
We have heard from the Victorian Bar that they consider this bill as a guaranteed litigation risk. I note your submission talks about Citizen Go testing the bill in court. Do you think this bill has the capacity to turn into a legal nightmare the government wish they never caused? Will this bill be a nightmare for social media platforms, the government, the courts and social media users, and a harvest for lawyers?
Yes, it will, and we intend to challenge it if passed.
Thank you very much.